I got a great question for
Yes,
both of
me
you.
too.
I got a great question for both
Yeah.
of you. So we were talking about the org fields and information and data entering our org fields and then processing that through our intuition. For both of you, when's the last time a guy hit on you and you instantly knew, your gut feeling was like, no, this is not working. This is not going to work.
When was the last time?
When was the last time?
But yeah, that's kind of hard. It's putting me on the spot there. I don't know. How about you, Helen?
This is funny.
Welcome to another episode of Awaken Now What? I'm your host, JR.
And I'm your host, Helen. Awaken Now What is a podcast that illuminates your spiritual awakening and ascension. Our guest today, everyone, is Rebecca Meisel. Let's welcome Rebecca.
Welcome, Rebecca.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being on our podcast today. A little bit about yourself. You're a Reiki master, and you're the host of the podcast, The Spiritualist, and it's a very, very successful podcast. I was listening to your very first podcast last night, and it was such a moving, inspirational story. Do you mind sharing with our listeners a little bit about your history?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I grew up in a small town outside the city, very kind of religious background. So grew up in a very Christian home, very black and white viewpoints. So there wasn't a lot of room for growth or expansion unless you kind of fit that specific mold. And so I grew up very, I guess you could say, in that kind of box where, only these things were acceptable. There was no wiggle room. This is how you live life. And anything outside of that was very unaccepted. So grew up quite sheltered in that, grew up in a very small kind of bubble for many years. And so that's kind of how I grew up. And so coming from that background, it was very challenging when I started expanding spiritually and starting to ask questions, especially because that just wasn't normal. That wasn't normal in my community. Everybody believed the same thing. Everybody I associated with was not open-minded to change or asking questions. And it was very, there was a little bit of that shame that kind of came through if you did. So it was like, oh, well, you lacked in faith, right? So that was a really challenging background to kind of come from, but it only seemed to spur my motivation to keep searching for more, even when there was those doubts that came in that, oh, it might be wrong, right? So that's kind of how my journey kind of started. And then as I started kind of growing up and asking those questions for myself, going a little deeper, that's when I just started realizing, okay, there's certain things that just don't seem to resonate with me as a person. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest things I'd say was probably a lot of beliefs that were kind of structured in conditional love. So doing this and then receiving love, then receiving connection with the universe or with God. And because of that, I felt very cut off for a long time. But that just kind of made me want to search more. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how it all began. I don't know how long you want me to go, but
as long as you want. I mean, I can relate. I grew up in a strict Catholic household. It was every Sunday. Sunday it was church. My mom would wake my ass up, and we would go to church. And if you didn't go to church, you're going to hell. And I didn't have any room to think for myself, and so I completely relate to that story. That story for sure.
Yes, 100%. And for us, it was very much a lifestyle. So, we had church. It wasn't just Sundays. It was like 3 days a week. Oh, wow. It was intensive. You had your personal Bible study. So you woke up, you started with your Bible, you went to bed, you listened to recordings of the Bible. It was very much ingrained in your lifestyle. And so there wasn't a lot of time really to have a life outside of that.
Right.
It was your whole kind of life. So that's kind of the background I had. So it was very integrated in me. And so when I started to think outside of that box, it was very scary, to be honest. And when I started waking up to a lot of belief systems, like I said, didn't quite resonate, that was very challenging because it made me question my whole life. And there was a lot of pressure because it was my whole family. My whole family was believing in that structure. And for me to think outside of that was very, it could cost me my relationships even with my family for thinking differently.
Right.
So it was very, very all-encompassing lifestyle for sure. That's kind of how it started.
And where did the courage come from to think different, stick with what you believed, did you follow your intuition? Did you follow the energy? Tell us about that kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So it happened kind of over time because I had to start, like, to be honest, I had to come to a point in my life where I had to realize something had to give. I was really unhappy. I was getting to be very depressed where I was. I was very open-minded, and I found it really hard to meet individuals that I resonated with. So because of that, I really didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't have a lot of people that I could share myself with. And of course, when you're in that kind of community, you can't really be free to be yourself. So what ended up happening, the first inspiration that really got me to finally say, okay, something's got to change, was basically that I wanted to meet people of like mind. I wanted to find people I could feel comfortable with. So my solution was to move away. So what I did initially was move, and I moved to a totally new place, totally new city away from everybody I knew, and tried to start over there with that same faith and everything. And that actually led to a lot of change in my life. And it was very interesting when I made the decision to move, how everything just seemed to magically line up. Everything just seemed to magically line up, like all arrows pointing, go, right? And so when I got there, I started meeting more people, and I started questioning, and I started to notice how I was being very drawn to certain individuals, that I worked with or who I'd meet. And of course, those people were supposedly very off limits to me because they weren't the same faith. So there was a whole kind of thing. And that started making me challenge my beliefs because I was like, well, these are good people. Why should I fear being friends with other people? Why should I be, then I got the wheels turning, right? Like, oh, maybe there are really good people outside of my religious upbringing that I actually want to engage with and who actually have other ideas. And I noticed more and more my intuition pulling me to really start engaging with people. And that's what really kind of helped started opening up my mind, helping me understand like what I'd been taught might not be exactly what I personally resonate with. And it really started opening up my perceptions there. And then when that started challenging my old beliefs, I'd say that's when that spiritual awakening really happened, because it was like, okay, now it's time to question everything. Now it's time to really go in to who you are and what you want. Now that you're away from everybody in your life that you've known, it's like, who are you? When you're by yourself, you have to really go in and start doing that introspective work. And that's what started happening. And as that started progressing, I started trusting myself more. I started feeling more empowered because I was making my own decisions, not influenced by others. And I started really acting on my intuition then and starting to bring more of awareness. And so after all of that, my parents visited, and then that really challenged me because it was like all my old belief systems, all my past coming to visit. And it was like, whoo, okay, revisiting all of this, all these old structures and the strictness and the limits. And I started realizing just how much I craved that freedom to just be myself and have that acceptance. So from there, after they left, I just came to a point where I was like, okay, if I forced myself to continue down the same path, I just knew with everything within me, it would literally break me. And I just got to that point where I was like, I can't fit in that box anymore. I won't ever be that person that they want me to be and that I should be or am required to be by God. And that was basically the breaking point for me, where I was like, okay, so now what? Like, now I've got to start building my own life, my own belief systems from scratch and question everything. So that's kind of how it started. And then it just really grew from there, the more and more. And it did require a lot of inner strength to do that. And I constantly had to give myself permission every single day to be myself, regardless of what. And I think that was the defining moment for me, was when I looked at myself in the mirror one day to get ready for work. I looked at myself in the mirror and I told myself, just for the next 24 hours, I'm going to give myself permission to be myself and to not be Christian Rebecca, not be, what my parents and family wanted. And then that whole day, I magically met like the most amazing individuals at work that just out of the blue started coming out of the woodwork, talking to me about spirituality, talking to me about things I was very uncomfortable with in the past. But I was open, and it was amazing to see. And what was interesting is that certain individual I met that day, she had actually never really spoken to me much before. But she approached me that day and she told me that she had actually belonged to the organization that I did in the past. And she had broken out of that. And she had started living her own life. And she told me exactly what I needed to hear that day. She said, basically, she didn't want to disrespect where she came from. She didn't feel hard feelings about where she came from. But she realized there was so much more. And that exactly spoke to my heart, because that's how I felt. I was like, how can I shame all my family, all my upbringing? That's just not me. But I know there's more. There's a calling that I want to discover more. And that day it gave me that permission. And that really started helping me recognize the universe was really bringing things together for me. So it was really cool. Yeah, really, really cool.
That is such an amazing story. And you are the perfect person for this podcast episode. For the listeners out there, we're talking about intuition. And Rebecca, you followed your intuition throughout that whole phase. And not only did you follow it, you began to develop it through that transitional period. So for the listeners out there, Rebecca, what is intuition and why is it so important to follow your gut?
Absolutely. So intuition for me is that strong inner knowing. So that inner voice or inner compass, you might say, that really helps to guide you and make decisions in life. And what I've really realized throughout my journey is it's going to look different for everybody. So how you receive your intuition, how it comes through for you, is going to be very unique. And that's why when I started searching, one of the best things I could do for myself was just go, okay, what feels right to me? What resonates with me? What feels good? Because intuition isn't always logical, but I started to recognize when I listened to that direction inside, I always ended up going right where I needed to go. And so for me, that development really, really started to trust, and you do, it requires that radical trust of yourself sometimes to really develop that voice. And sorry, what was the second part of that? I just went into that.
I think you answered it. I think you answered.
Oh, did I? Okay. I'm like, wait, there's a second part to your question. Sorry. Oh my goodness.
I don't know. Over my past 5 years of awakening, I've learned that women are naturally more intuitive than men. So Helen and Rebecca, I'm going to refer to you. What are great tools to better tune into your intuition?
I think tuning in starts with stillness and quietness. And I think that, as we kind of talk on the show sometimes, JR, about hacking, like keeping us busy and the media and the distractions is a way of hacking that stillness and tuning in. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. I would agree with you 100%. for me to develop that, it really required me to remove distractions and to really sit with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that means, a lot of times people say, like, when they refer to meditating, it's so hard for them because they're so busy in their mind.
Right.
And one thing that I've really started to accept and realize is that's okay. Meditation doesn't have to be an emptying of your brain
Right.
and your mind and your life. It's like allowing yourself to just be present
Mm-hmm.
sometimes is enough to help you notice what you're actually feeling, and really trusting those emotional messengers too, because I found for myself, my logical brain was really good at, bypassing those emotions and the intuition. But the more you start actually giving yourself that time to be present, I find the more you start noticing and becoming aware of that voice. And it helps. It really helps.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say stillness, meditation,
Right.
all of those things are very powerful.
Right. Even we had a podcast with past life. Hang on, I let my cat out. She's bugging.
Yes. Aw, no problem.
One comes in.
I did
I
notice
know
a lot of meowing.
They're so picky. I get a kick out of that. My
Yeah.
cat was the same way back in the day. No worries.
All right. Sorry about that. Okay.
No, that's fine.
Picking it back up. We had a podcast interview with a past life regression therapist a few days ago.
Ah,
And
amazing.
yeah, it was such a fascinating interview. And before each session, he puts the client under hypnosis, and he takes them to the theta frequency. And he doesn't go any deeper. He mentioned that he doesn't go any deeper because he wants them to be kind of conscious and awake to relay this information, whatever they're receiving. And he made a great point that whenever he takes them into the alpha state or even theta state of the brain, that these people, all of them, 100% of his clients never failed to reach hypnosis. And it's under these brainwave frequencies that they are able to access so much information from past lifetimes. And when we're talking about intuition, it's really just that, like you said, being present, meditating, so that you can access more information within your auric field, within your certain environment, whatever you're holding. We know the spiritual based truth is that all is energy, right? All is energy.
Yes.
And all energy is information. And Andrew Bartz puts it so greatly that our bodies are data processing machines, and whatever enters our auric field, we can absorb through the body, and then we can decode and then unpack it through our intuition. And it's just, we are highly intuitive beings, and reaching those states of stillness, like we were talking about. And I was even thinking about like just anything present, drawing, playing guitar. We can access those alpha states, those theta states, even exercising, even just that deep state of focus, right?
Yes. Yeah. And almost surrender too is kind of what I want to say is the word for me. It's like when you can just let go, and whatever helps you do that. And in that state of inspiration, that's when we're more than likely to let go, right? And allow that to just come in. And I think that's one of the best things to do if you're wanting to start. It's like, okay, what helps me let go and just let go of control and let things flow. So I love that. I love the movement aspect. I think that's so important too. And I think that's why a lot of people I speak to, it's like, they're like, man, I always seem to get intuitive hits when I'm in the shower or if I'm driving, right?
It just comes randomly at times, right? It's just like, you're just not even thinking. Like, exactly what you're not even thinking. You're just being. And then
you're just in the moment. Yeah. And it allows, and it's so funny because like a lot of our guides are like, yeah, that's the only time I can reach you when you're not busy. Like, it's just like, it's so funny. So many of them are like, yeah, like, can you make some time for me, please? Because this is the only time I can get in.
I got a great question for both of you. I got a great question for both of you. So we were talking about the auric fields and information and data, entering our auric fields and then processing that through our intuition. For both of you, when's the last time that someone, and it could be like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or recently, that a guy hit on you and you instantly knew, your gut feeling was like, no, this is not working. This is not going to work.
When was the last time?
When was the last time?
I don't know. I'd say it's more for me with certain individuals. Like, yeah, I'd say it's more friends actually, or more people that want to work with me. Sometimes you have to, as a practitioner, be diligent about that,
Right.
like who you can actually help and who's ready to do that work. So I'd say it's actually more that for me. I'd say it's more certain individuals. And but yeah, you can get that real strong feeling in your gut where it's like, okay, I don't think this is going to be a good fit, or this won't resonate. Right? This doesn't resonate. Doesn't quite resonate here. But yeah, that's kind of hard. It put me on the spot there. I don't know. How about you, Helen?
This is funny. I don't know that it happened directly for me in the most recent memory, but like JR, I was on that matchmaking service. So I know that like the second match that I got, I like complementary relationships, and he was like into Buddhism. He meditated a lot. And so I was like, I felt this like, oh, we're too similar, right? So I knew that it was like, it wouldn't be what I wanted. But so that's kind of like the last time I had that kind of like true knowing. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
In that.
Oh, now I've thought of one.
Okay.
Now I thought of one. Okay. That made me think of it. I'm like, wait, okay. So it was funny when I moved back home. So I'd been moved away, and I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to find somebody. So I similarly went on online dating to see if I could just meet people, see if there was a common interest. And so yeah, I met this guy, and we had very similar morals and very similar like ideas about life. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, okay, well, this is nice. But I realized the more I tried to be like, entertain it and be like, okay, yeah, I want to open up, the more my intuition was like, no, like, no, don't go there. Stop trying to open up. So the more I tried to force it and be like, okay, well, we lied. Like, on paper, we aligned. And my intuition was like, nope, don't go there. And it was amazing because I kept trying. So I met up with him again because I'm like, this has to work. Like, this has to work. And the next time we met up, it was like this moment. I looked at him and it hit me. It was like, why are you trying so hard? It's like, it's just not there.
Right.
It's just not there. And so my intuition was really strong then. And then, yeah, I made up an excuse and left, but that was it. It's just like, okay, time to go. Yeah.
Right. And it just your both of your examples show that we are constantly using our intuition on a daily basis. And so it is, I mean, when we step into higher consciousness, as you two have been and are doing, we have kind of a responsibility to keep honing it, to keep sharpening it, to use it for our advantage for the greater good. And that's why this is such an interesting conversation. Thank you both.
Yeah. How about you? Did you have anything come up like that for yourself?
Well, okay. So
I feel like there's a good one.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm like, oh, I'm building up the momentum here. I'm excited.
You turned the tables on me. I see.
I did.
I was huge into dating about 4-5 years ago. I was like, I think before my awakening, maybe 6 years ago, I was just like in the dating scene. I was out every Friday, Saturday. So I was one of those guys that where the woman was like, I'm not sure about this dude, but it was
That's fair.
part of my own soul journey. And actually before that, I was so in a shell. I was so shy. I could not even talk to women. So when I figured out how to talk to women, man, did I take advantage of it. I took advantage of it, and I had fun, and I experienced that part of my life that I needed to experience, because prior to that experience, I was just working. It was just 5 days a week working. Weekends, I was just sleeping, and that's it. And then come Monday, I was working. So I really enjoyed that part of my life. And I mean, hopefully I don't come off sounding like a douchebag to the listeners, but it was such a significant part of my life, and I don't regret it, and I learned a lot from it. But to answer your question, yes, there's this one example. I was at a bar, and we were sitting there with a few friends, and this girl turns to me and she goes, "Oh my God, can I hit on you?" And I looked at her. I was like, I've never heard that from a woman before coming to me. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was so jarring that I didn't know what to say. But in my gut, I was like, no. No,
You're just like, no, it's not
she
happening.
was drunk.
It's not happening.
Yeah, she was drunk and she needed some time to sober up. But I was like, no, nope. Not happening. Not happening.
Oh my goodness. And it's amazing how like it comes through so strong, hey?
Right.
When you're in those situations.
So strong.
Yeah. It's just like it, and you trusted them. And I think it's because so many of us too, we're not taught how to work with intuition or understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of learn to look everywhere outside of ourselves. But when we're challenged with those situations of life, it makes us like, oh, immediately I know, I trust my feeling about this, right? So sometimes I think we can actually shut off our intuition during the day or during certain circumstances. It goes on autopilot sometimes.
Right.
I feel some people, or they don't trust it, or they don't consciously listen, right? So I think that's a great example because it's like a knee-jerk reaction. No, okay, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good. That's a good question.
What advice or tips do you have for building that trust or leaning back into that trust, or even getting back into the saddle with your intuition? Because you mentioned turning it off throughout the day.
Yeah, I think once again, it comes like, for me, what really helped me was setting more intentions and having more of an awareness of myself. So, when we set an intention, I even find for myself now, I do that every morning. Like, what is it that I want to accomplish or be more mindful of? And I found that is such a simple way to keep that more aware throughout the day. Like, keep yourself more in that awareness of what you're trying to do. So if you're wanting to build your intuition and listen more to that inner voice, it's like set that intention and also put it out to the universe to help you with it. Because one thing I've really learned is we're not responsible to learn everything by ourselves. There's so much help that's available if we allow it. And it's like, that's why I love the word co-create with the universe, because the universe is your friend. It wants to help you get to your highest potential. It wants to help you develop that voice. So if you give your guides permission to help you and set that intention, you'll be amazed at what starts happening, and I always think of that day when I set that intention and things magically seem to change not one day because I said it to myself, I'm going to do it. So it's like really allowing yourself to really get clear on what it is you're wanting and then bringing that mindfulness to it. And I think when you're conscious of it, it can be a very powerful tool to help you really move that forward in a way that feels good for you. And I think that's the best advice too for people who are just starting out, like what feels good, and don't overanalyze that. Lean into that. Oh, okay. Like, in the beginning I was very hesitant about spirituality because I'd heard so much negative about it and how, intuition and all that was like working with demons and the devil. There was so much of that, right? So for me to start leaning into it was very scary. It was like, who do I trust? How do I know if I can trust the information I'm reading? There was so much fear. And so the next tool that really helped me was, well, what naturally did I feel called to? What naturally felt good and gave me a sensation of love? Because that always is something you can trust. If it's coming from love, you know it's right. If it's from fear, then maybe not, right? So it's really I learned over my journey was a big differentiator for me. Was the advice I was getting, what was the inkling I was getting, and was it fear-based or love-based? And that really helped me a lot.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The biggest block to our intuition, as you said it, is fear. It's fear. It's the biggest block for the listeners out there to your intuition, because what it does is it activates your sympathetic nervous system, right? Going into fight or flight, sending the stress chemicals out throughout your body so that you aren't present, and you're letting your nervous system run the show, inherently blocking that connection to your spirit and your intuition. and living in your gut.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it so perfectly. So thank you.
Yeah.
What are some of the best, or how important is it actually to ground in the body when you are reading and decoding information from your intuition?
Oh, super important. Super important. I find grounding, just as we know, there's so many benefits and studies and so many things that you can go into, but it really just helps you feel more whole in yourself.
Right.
And I don't know, like when I ground, it's like, it feels like all this energy that was up here comes down into here. And then it's like, oh, things don't seem so chaotic. Things don't seem so crazy and scattered. And that's so important because especially when we're trying to listen to our voice and we're not used to that in the beginning, we can get in that, like, is that my voice?
Mm-hmm.
Or is that this, right? Like we do. That's the nature of being a human. We question and the ego comes in, right? So being grounded helps you eliminate sometimes a lot of that fear and come centered within your body. And feeling your body's energy is just as important because your body gives you a lot of intuitive messages as well. So if you're not present in your body, how can you listen to how it's responding?
Exactly. Yeah, your intuition again is inherently blocked.
Mm-hmm.
So many people are traumatized and dissociate from their body that they block their own intuition. What are your intuitive advice for people who are traumatized and trying to heal through that to gain better access into their intuition?
So that's a really good question. I think sometimes it can be as simple as, well, I want to say make it simple for yourself, because a lot of times people can overcomplicate it, especially when they're diving in. And if they've gone through a lot of trauma, it can be really scary, right? It can be intimidating. And so my advice is go slowly, go gently, and once again, listen to what feels good to you, because for everybody it's going to be different. But I would say physical movement is a really great way to become more present in your body, and also, well, grounding, right? So grounding regularly, connecting with earth elements, walking on the beach, the sand, concrete, even if you must, grass, all of those things help you bring that naturally in without it feeling like it's an undertaking or without getting in your head about it. Because I feel a lot of us, when we're traumatized, we have that resistance, right, to going in. So I'd say start slowly, start simply by doing very simple actions that make you more present in the physical. So that, and then of course, if you feel called, work with other people to help you, right, to really get that information and guidance as you go through those things and go deeper. But I'd say that would be my first place to start. And then of course, ask for assistance, ask for help from your guides and your spiritual team, because that, honestly, they'll lead you the right way. They'll get you to the people you need. They will show you what's right for you. And that's super helpful when you're starting.
For people who aren't like familiar with talking to your guides or inviting your guides in your life, like you just have regular conversations with them? Do you invoke them? Like, what is the way to... Yeah.
For me, once I actually trained in Reiki, once I really started surrendering to my spirituality and my spiritual path, it was like it found me, because I really was afraid. I had a lot of fear, like as I was telling you, and it was very difficult for me to let go. And I had a huge separation from God and myself, because I really grew up with that belief that you couldn't really have a personal connection with him. We were here just to serve, and then you can get love from God, and then you might have a relationship, but there was never a connection personally.
Wow.
So with that, I had a huge belief system around that. So and especially when I left my faith that I grew up with, I felt like they teach you you're severed off. You have no connection to God anymore.
So crazy.
That was very difficult, very, very difficult. And so I actually went through about a year and a half, I'd say, where I couldn't even think of connecting with God, with Christ, or even talk about any form of spirituality or religion, because it was so triggering and it was so hurtful, and it just reminded me of my past and how separate I was. and I carried a lot of guilt and shame about what I did, right? Leaving and all of that. So I had to really first start kind of working through that shame, I'd say, was the biggest thing. And when I started seeking out outward help, and Reiki kind of found me that way because I was very scared of it. I had no idea. I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And then a coworker of mine started practicing it. And the more I saw the changes in her, I started recognizing how I needed to heal. And I started kind of envying her connection that she started getting. And I was like, oh, well, what if that is possible? You know, and I started seeing the synchronicities, and I couldn't deny that there was someone or something reaching out to me. And so finally, when I took the plunge and I trained in Reiki, and I did some Reiki and trained in it, after that, that's when I finally gave myself to fully open. And it was like the energy when it came in, I'll never forget it. It was like a piece of me came home, is the best way I can put it. I finally came home to myself. I finally felt things that I'd been wanting to feel and felt so disconnected from my whole life. And it was a magical moment. And as I started working with energy work and starting to self-heal through self-Reiki, that's when I started all of a sudden getting a connection with my guides, because Reiki calmed me enough. It helped me relax enough and surrender enough that I could let them in.
Right.
And I didn't realize that I had been blocking them out because of my belief systems and my fear, right? So when I did self-Reiki, the first time I did it, my grandma came through right away, who had passed. And I had a huge fear of talking to spirits. It was like, that was a huge no-no and something I was terrified of. And then all of a sudden I was having this conversation with her, and I'm like, you know, I didn't realize until I finished that I was like, oh my gosh, I just had a conversation with my grandma. I just talked to someone who's dead. Like, I was just like, what the heck? Like, the awareness didn't even come in that whole time until it happened. And I was like, did I just make that up? Because that's what just happened. And then it started making me realize how it happened so naturally. There was no forcing. There was no fear. There was nothing in me that felt it was wrong. It felt the polar opposite. It felt so right and so natural. And so ever since then, I do connect with them every day. I do spend time really working with my guides, and they change up all the time according to what you need, right? And that's what's so beautiful, is there is this unlimited source that you can tap into and call in. And it's just an amazing experience. It changed my whole life, because from feeling so cut off to all of a sudden having this free flow of love, of support, it really, like, it just burst open my heart. And it does make me a little emotional, because it changed my whole life in such a dramatic way. And that's when I really started learning and realizing I've got to keep doing this. Like, I've got to help other people do this, like, and recognize that they're so loved, even when they don't realize they are. And that's why I do what I do. You know, it's very much to help bring people that awareness. And that's why I share my story. Hopefully helps one person. That's the goal.
So amazing.
I love it. I love your work. That's great. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Passion and feel it. So awesome.
Yes. Yeah. And it's beautiful. And as you guys probably know, you know, when you get that connection and you meditate and you feel that love, it's indescribable. It really is. It's very humbling and amazing. So I try to connect as often as I can.
Yeah.
As often as I can. Yeah, absolutely.
And you proved it. The more you heal, the more it just opens you up to new abilities, to new horizons, to new insights, to new intuitive abilities. And it really, really, I mean, it's so important to self-heal. And you've proved it time and time again. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
How important is gut health and diet in developing your intuition?
I would say it's very crucial, very crucial. One thing that I did prior to my journey is I worked a lot in the natural health industry. So I did a lot with herbalism and homeopathy and all of that. And I had really done a lot of physical healing. And that's when I started recognizing, when I started integrating the spiritual work as well, just how imperative it is to balance both, because what really came through for me is, okay, I did all the physical stuff, but I was still missing an element. And then when I did all the spiritual and all of the emotional work, I was like, oh, I can't forget the physical, right? It all body, mind, and soul.
Right.
So it's very imperative, if you want to also get to those higher frequencies, higher consciousness, elevate your consciousness. It's important your body is fueled by highly light force foods, right? So we're giving our body constant energies that help continuously elevate that consciousness as well, and that frequency. So I'd say that is very important when you're working with intuition, is fueling your body and looking after it in a way that really helps you accomplish that.
Like staying away from McDonald's, processed foods, junk foods, all that stuff really, really inhibits your intuitive knowing abilities. And I used to do 24-hour fasts once a week. And that is, being hungry, right, is such a personal experience. Each person experiences hunger such a different way, but you can really test your personal limits when you don't have food. It's like, what am I thinking about? What am I encouraged to? What am I inspired to do rather than eat? When all you're thinking about is when can I get that next meal? When can I get that next piece of pizza? But
yes.
Spiritual hygiene, it's become so significant over the past few years for me. Like every now and then I'll do like a 1 day, like a 1 day fast or a juice cleanse, or I'll eat strictly vegetarian for a week. It's so important into integrating your spiritual life, and then also up leveling in frequency. And then also, experimenting. Like my diet isn't going to work for Helen's diet or your diet. It's all uniquely individual. It's a uniquely individual process.
Yes. How about you, Helen?
I have like an up and down journey with food. I think that's probably like where I'm learning the most. I'll go from being so strict on myself and then losing all the pleasure and joy of it to also like working with intention, as you shared earlier, Rebecca, like looking at my food and being like, even if it is chocolate, they are processed.
Yeah.
I love chips. Helen knows I love chips. I love chips. Are the worst food you can buy at the grocery store. I love chips though. Every time we
we all have it. We're human beings.
We all have it. And so, we stress the significance of spiritual hygiene. Yeah, I'll eat the chips. Helen knows this. Every time, like in the beginning when we created this podcast, you bring out chips for me to eat. And I'll eat the whole bag.
I know. It's so easy to do. I always laugh because in Reiki training, you actually can learn to Reiki your food. Like you Reiki your food before you eat it. And it raises the vibration and it helps it, set an intention with your food.
Right.
And I just thought that was so fascinating when I learned it. And I thought, oh, that is so neat. Like you can apply high frequency to everything, right? You can apply your spirituality to anything you really want. And it's really about, I love how you said the intention with your food, because that's so true. It's just like, okay. And not like, I know from my journey, I've had, like you, Helen, a kind of up and down, because, I'd go very strict and, I'd learn all the information, like, oh yeah, this is what I got to do. And then I'd be like, oh my gosh, I just really need to live my life. Like I want to be able to go to a restaurant sometimes and just order what I want. And, so I guess like my approach now is really learning to also intuitively eat, right? So it's like listening to your needs. And I think when you become more intuitive and more in your body, the more you start recognizing what it is not necessarily what you should do, but what you feel called to do and what you are feeling called to eat. And one thing I've been really learning to do is like, how can I pack as much nutrients into my meals as possible?
Mm-hmm.
So even if I have a little something, I'm still meeting my body's needs. And that's been really helping me, is making those small goals that are attainable and that you can actually kind of follow through with. And that's been really helping me even develop my intuition further, because I'm more going into, how does my body feel?
Right.
What does it want? And that's how I decide, what meal I'm going to make. Right. So that's something I've been doing. It's been very helpful. Very helpful.
That was very therapeutic to hear. And I needed that reminder of like nutrient-based foods and
yeah. And it's okay to sometimes indulge. I think that's my mentality anyway, because it's like, we're here to be human too, because I think one big thing is like, I felt for so long that wasn't okay to be a human being. And now it's like, give yourself permission to be a human sometimes,
Right.
Don't go all overboard, but yes, allow yourself humanity. Oh my goodness.
You brought up Reiki and your food and raising the vibration of it. I used to pray to my food before I ate dinner or lunch, whatever it may be, and try to raise its vibration. But can you give us an example of using Reiki on your food and kind of a step-by-step process so that the listener knows that they can do it themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So even if you train in Reiki or if you haven't, I am a strong believer that energy is energy. We can all utilize energy, and it really comes from our intention. So I always recommend start with an intention. Okay, I would like this food to be easily digested. I want my body to absorb its nutrients. I want to be able to raise the frequency of my food so it's truly utilized for my highest and greatest good. And I love using that terminology of my highest and greatest good. And you can apply that to anything. So it's like, let me utilize this for my highest and greatest good. So whatever feels good, word it however you like, or say it however you like in your head. And then what I really like to do is to get acquainted with energy is kind of create that friction in your hands. So so if you're training in Reiki, you would just activate your Reiki. But for those of you who don't do it, you want to create that physical, tangible energies for you to connect it with. Okay. Because of course, energy is always there, but this helps you tangibly get it. So it's like, bring those hands together, rub them quickly together, and create that warmth between your hands. And that creates that friction. And if you want to do it, you absolutely can.
Yep.
And this is a fun technique I do. It's called the energy ball. Okay. And so what you're going to do is, when you feel that heat, I want you to slowly start pulling your hands apart, just very gently. And when you start doing that, you'll actually feel that energy pulling away. And what I love clients to do, or anybody to do, is just visualize that little ball of energy between your hands, okay? And just see how big you can make it. So if you keep pulling the hands further and further apart, how large of an energy ball can you make, okay? So when you feel you've made that ball good enough and a good size, I want you to try bringing the hands against it, so making it smaller. Do you feel any resistance?
Yeah.
Right? And this is right. So then you can kind of go back and go, okay, I'm going to make it bigger. And now I'm going to make it smaller. And then you just kind of keep going back and forth. And you start really feeling the energy yourself. And I think that's so crucial when you're starting to work with energy and you want to be aware of it. I'm someone, I need to feel it. I need to actually experience it. So I always get people to start off with this little exercise. Okay. So when it feels good, you can just keep shrinking it down until you're done. And then what I would then do is, when you feel that energy tangible, you set again that intention in the forefront of your mind, and they literally just put your hands over top of whatever it is you want to send that energy to. So whether it's your food, whether it's another individual who needs healing or needs, love energy, whatever it is, just set that intention, and that energy will go to whatever it is that you're directing it to. And the best way I kind of describe it, it's like, when you go to comfort someone and you have that intention and you give them a hug, they feel that. They feel that love. They feel that intention of comfort. So that's exactly what you're doing when you're working with energy work. That's the best way I can explain it. It's very much intentional based. Mm-hmm.
That is so cool.
Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. That is such a great tip. For all the
Thank you for that.
Yeah, That's so
How
cool.
did it feel for you guys? Did you feel it?
Yeah. Then I felt it like,
I could
and
tell.
I was like,
Yeah.
as soon as you said it, I was like, oh,
There
there
it
it
is.
is.
There it is. Yes.
And for me, I really enjoyed the responsiveness. Like you were saying, like, okay, now tell it you're going to make it small. Okay. Whoa. Now tell it you're going to make it big. Oh, okay.
Yes. Absolutely. It's amazing to know that each of us has this ability to do it naturally. Like you said, everything is energy. So why wouldn't we be able to use it or, manipulate it in a way that's good for us? It's so important to bring that awareness. And I always say, if your heart feels heavy, well, then hold your heart. Hold your heart.
Right.
Let it intentionally envision that heaviness leaving and you sending that love energy to your heart. All those things, and you'll feel it when you actually put your mind to it and you allow yourself to be intentional about working with it. It's really amazing. Yeah, I love seeing people try it for the first time because it's like, oh my God, I feel it. It's so awesome. I love it. Too cute.
There's gonna be a slew of people after hearing this podcast doing that same thing, and then directing that energy over their food.
Yes, why not? Right? Like I always say to people, like, what's the worst that could happen?
Right.
Like, why not try it?
Exactly.
Try it.
Exactly. Because I mean,
see how it feels for you.
These fast food restaurants, you have so many people handling your food, right? And what's the energy transference from, say, the person that works at McDonald's who's holding your burger and the person taking care of your fries, and then you eat that. You eat all that. And say if they're having a shitty day at work, you're consuming that energy. And so
yes,
it is so important to, man, such a good tip, Rebecca. Such a good tip.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad it helps.
Yeah,
I'm glad it helps.
I already feel my relationship with food healing in the moment.
Oh,
yeah, me too.
amazing.
Me too.
Well, and just another tidbit that just popped in my head is when you do the energy ball, if you have a certain issue that you're working on, put the issue into the ball. Just envision the issue into the ball of energy and send it love and light. And just do that every day for 5 minutes and just see how it changes the energy towards the problem or the issue you're facing. And that actually really helps as well because it changes the energy and it changes your perspectives of your issues or problems and what you're working on. And so I've done that as well, and it really does help. So maybe try that too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That is a great tip, especially if it only takes like 5 minutes. A lot of the times you hear tips or hygiene things, and it's just like, oh, another thing on top of another thing.
Yes.
Like 5 minutes totally sounds like I could do that.
Yes. Well, and that's just so important because I'm a big advocate of that is how can I make this easy? How can I make this easy for myself to do and be attainable and actually do every day, right? And so it's true. A lot of us want the quick fix, and that's not what I'm saying, but I am saying when you're building your intuition and you're building up a good relationship with food, it's like it really is keeping those small promises to yourself and not making it a huge deal, right? Like keep it simple. Keep it simple. And then you'll be able to really actively do it. That's what worked for me anyway.
Yeah. I appreciate that one.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad it helped.
What are other kind of tangible exercises aside from from raising your food's vibration that you can do on a daily basis or even weekly basis to further develop your intuitive abilities? Like me and my girlfriend we did this exercise a few nights ago, and it was to wrap. I told her to wrap a certain object in a piece of paper so that I couldn't see it. When she had it wrapped, I came out into the living room and I sat down on my couch and I went to my center. And it's basically meditating and relaxing the body. And for all the listeners out there, you can get to your center in many different ways. But for me, it's counting or visualizing the number 3 times, closing my eyes in a meditative state, visualizing the number 2 3 times, and then visualizing the number 1 3 times. Going to my center.
I like that.
Yeah, I was going into my center, and I told her I was ready, and I stuck out my hand, and she placed the wrapped paper in my hand, and I was supposed to, the exercise was to intuit the energy, right? Absorb that energy through my hand, and so I can intuit and figure out what was in this wrapped piece of paper. And I immediately, something came up immediately, and I dismissed it. I dismissed it because I was like, it can't be that easy. Can't be that easy.
Yeah.
And also I didn't trust myself. That was the other part. I didn't trust it.
Yeah.
I didn't trust it. And so I kept sitting there with a piece of paper in my hand, just continuing to think. I was like, it can't be that easy. It can't be that easy.
Yeah.
3 minutes go by. I'm like, all right, fuck it. I'm just going to say it. And I asked her, and her job during this whole thing was to validate my responses or tell me that I was incorrect. And I said, all right, is it a crystal? And there's a little silence. And she said, that is correct. Keep going. and then I was like, okay, so fuck, it is a crystal. And then I just continued to describe what the crystal was colored like. I was like, there's black specks on it. It's white-ish, and there's black specks on it. And she goes, that is correct. Keep going. And at that point, I was like, all right, let's just figure out what it is. And it was a little line crystal I had bought months ago. And that's just such a great intuitive technique, just to intuit the energy from that wrap paper, absorbing it into your body and feeding that energy up into your entire being so that you can actually decipher what that object is. And
very cool.
For my girlfriend tried it, and she got frustrated. So for the listeners out there who try this, please do not get frustrated. My girlfriend started crying, and I was like, "Oh no, don't cry!" I didn't try to make it competitive at all. I wasn't even joking about it, but she got really frustrated with the process. So for all those listening out there, be patient with yourself and learn from me. Trust yourself. Trust your intuition, because I didn't trust myself when it started, but I ended up being accurate. So good exercise.
There you go. That's amazing. That's a super fun exercise. I'm gonna have to try that one. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I find like one of my favorite ways of like developing intuition and trusting myself really comes with a few little things. So when I was first starting, I was working with my Reiki master, and she told me, she's like, you know what, I really think you need to start opening up your spiritual gifts. And she's like, I really see you being very, like having a strong inner knowing. And she started telling me like, you're getting a lot through your thoughts. And she's like, that's why sometimes you'll just know to do something, or you'll know what to say. She's like, because a lot of times, and I was getting a lot of thought-based intuition. And she's like, try writing it all down and just see what you get. And so I actually started off sessions that way, where I would do their Reiki over distance, because I was terrified of actually doing them in person. I was very shy. And so I was like, I'm just going to do distance sessions. So that's how I started, is just distance Reiki. But while I was doing the Reiki, I was receiving a lot of messages, but I had no way to tell if they were accurate at all. And so I had to really just surrender to it. And so as I practiced, I actually just started intuitively writing. So I'd intuitively just start writing whatever I saw, whatever I thought, whatever visuals I'd get, whatever it was that started coming through. And I just wrote it all down. And when I was first practicing, before I even charged anybody, I was just doing people I kind of knew, and then some strangers who were open to practicing with me. And I sent them an email with whatever I wrote. And it was really interesting to see how every single time it was accurate, and every single time it was exactly what they needed to hear. And for me, I was like, I'm literally just making stuff up in my own head. That's what it felt like. It felt like, you know, I was totally unsure. And I'm like, I have no idea if this is going to resonate. I have no idea if this is going to be personal. And one of the first sessions I did was for a lady, her husband just passed, and I didn't know. And so when I did the reading, he came up and he was in his full baseball attire. Like he literally had like old school baseball like everything. And he kept showing me kids and all of that. And so I kept writing these details down, and he was like swinging the bat, being funny, kind of like swinging. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. And I'm like, I have no idea how this is going to resonate for this person. And so I sent the email, and I'm like, please, hopefully she doesn't think I'm crazy. But it was her husband who recently passed, and she said he coached Little League for a really long time. And so he would be goofy, and he'd always do those kind of things, right? But I found that tool of writing really helpful because it got me out of my logical brain, and it actually distracted me enough to focus on what I was intuitively getting. So that was a tool that I still use. I use a lot of journaling, writing, automatic writing.
Right.
That has been an amazing tool for me. And then going back and just going, okay, how does this resonate? Can be really amazing sometimes, even when you don't fully have that trust of self yet. Just give yourself that intention that you're going to let it flow and just see what comes through. And you might be surprised. You might actually get the exact advice you needed. And you can be like, oh, wow, I did that. I did that. Right? So I found that a very useful tool for helping intuition and building that self-trust as well, is actually just writing. It's very simple, very easy.
That's so cool.
Great.
So you're just writing, with intuitive writing. You're just writing whatever comes to mind.
Yeah. So I do, the best way I can kind of describe it is, so it's called automatic writing. So basically when you're allowing your guides to give you their messages or to receive your intuitive messages, and you set that intention beforehand, and then you just start writing whatever comes to your mind, whatever comes up. Like you literally just write it anyway. Don't judge it, just write it. That's what really helped me, because it really helped me develop that confidence when it was correct, right? And it was always correct. And that was what was mind-blowing. I was like, oh my gosh, this is my own advice. I needed that, like this is what I needed, or this is what this person needed. And so I find writing such a beautiful way of really connecting even with your own voice, and can help you really unpack what you're feeling or what your brain's really focusing on. And it helps you really get to the depth of what you're dealing with or what you're needing to go deeper into. So that's definitely something that I still use. I do a lot of energy updates. So they're basically readings for the collective energies for the week ahead. So every week, that's what I do. I'll just sit down with my guides and I just write down whatever it is that they want to tell us for the week. And then I do the recording. So every Monday I do that and then put that out on YouTube. So you kind of have an idea of what the themes are for the week, or what to prepare for, or what resonates with you. So it's fun. And I love doing that way. It's really great.
That is so cool.
It is
It's
really
awesome.
cool. I'm going to try that one too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's really helpful. I really recommend it. How about you, Helen? Do you have any tips you do?
For tuning into our intuition, I do set, like before I go to bed, because that's like the 4D, right? I set the intention that I want to commune with my higher self. So that's a way, like
Lovely.
every night I'm like reaffirming that intention. And then what is another way? The breath work that I practice, after we do the breath work, there's like a meditative part, and I really feel there's like an ego dissolution in there. And I feel like that's like direct connection to the divine intuition. And so those are the ways that I make sure that I get in and have the connections. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. I like to do intentions at night too. I think that's so powerful. And do you find like your dreams get way more lucid and way more active?
Yes.
Yeah. It's like you get all your messages at night while you're sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. That's a super helpful tool too. I love that you brought that up. That's perfect. Yeah, that's super good.
So there's a jar of salt under my bed. I used to sleep with a plastic bag full of salt under my pillow, because salt neutralizes negative energies. And 2 years ago, when I first started sleeping with salt under my pillow, my dreams got fucking weird. So fucking weird. So weird. I'm still trying to decipher the meaning of salt in weird dreams. But there's definitely some connection there. It's just really fucking weird. Anyways, I digress.
Yeah. No, salt is super powerful. That's so important for me. It's weird. Every day I have to have like a salt bath because it really helps me decompress, and I actually found it very grounding for me as well. So I find water very grounding. And so I find a hot bath with salt. Oh, if you're ever dealing with negative energy, that's the way to go. It really helps me. It's like literally every day I'm in there. I'm so good in there. Oh, it's wonderful. It works miracles. I love it.
Yeah, such a rich episode of stuff for the listeners to try.
Yeah, we're definitely getting up those tips, hey?
Yeah.
I love it though. It's fun.
Yeah.
It is really fun.
Yeah, you guys have dropped some knowledge and wisdom today. So, wow, what an amazing episode. Thank you, Rebecca.
You're so welcome. Thank you. I've been so honored to be here. So thank you for having me.
This is the now what portion of our episode. So Rebecca, you've given us so much to think about, so much to try. In this section, what is your heart's message for like after you've awakened to your intuition and now you're living it from it more? What would you like to say?
Oh, for our listeners?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Essentially, one of my biggest messages is to stay true to yourself, regardless of what the journey brings. Give yourself that time to really listen to your heart and to listen to those messages, because I feel like that has been one of the biggest game changers for me. And just to know that you are loved and you are never alone. I think that's one of my biggest messages and callings when I work with people, is to make sure you feel that, because you really are, and to connect to that and know that each of you does have that ability. You have that divine right to connect and to know you can, even if you feel it's hard or challenging or scary. Don't let the fear thwart you from your calling, and to really just allow yourself to surrender to your journey, because it is so beautiful when you let it be. So I guess that's what I want to say.
Aww, so lovely.
Thank you, guys.
Where can the listeners find you?
So you can find me on my Instagram or social media under Sacred Reiki Healing, or my name, Rebecca Meisel, and my website, RebeccaMeisel.com.
I'll make sure to put all that info in the show notes. Ladies and gentlemen, the lovely Rebecca Meisel.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And the lovely Jay and Helen. Thank you guys so much for doing what you do. It's so appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.
Aw, thank you.
Yes.
If you like this episode, please subscribe. I'm JR.
And I'm Helen. Check us out on Discord so we can hear how you did with all of the tips from this episode on intuition.
Yes, we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Peace.
Till next time.